Well, welcome out there once again to my program. Always a pleasure to have you out there. This is the panel show, and I'm sure you're familiar with the panel show. What we try to do on a panel show is discuss some of the issues very pertinent to the city of Fall River. You out there might think so, but sometimes we wonder about the city administration and the officials, if they think some of these issues are pertinent. There's a number of things that have been happening. As you know, problem in the fire department as far as manning, which could soon materialize down to 153 men, firefighters. We've got the revelation that the city a week or so ago, 15 to 16 million or 17 million dollars underfunded. The budget cannot handle the expenditures, and that's the difference. We've got of course, the train is still coming. Be patient. And there are a number of things that we'll be discussing. I have my panelist, CJ. How's things going?
I'm looking for a new Kevlar vest. If anyone has one, I'd greatly appreciate getting it because at this point, I think I'm going to need it.
And CJ is known as alias Jack Anderson. 10-pair taxpayer lawsuit might be coming up. Bob, you were in front of the city council last night.
As was CJ, and as usual, we're fighting the fight.
I heard you give him another black eye.
Well, hopefully I gave him more than that. Something to think about, maybe.
Joe Martin, city, school committee man.
Hi.
Top vote getter. Oh, the people love you, Joe.
Oh, thank you.
Good for you. How'd you feel? You broke some ribs a while back?
Yeah, I managed to slip and fall on the ice and fractured four ribs.
Oh.
Kind of a painful experience, but I'm getting over that.
You feel better now?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Okay, we're going to see you May 17th for the dance, so.
Yes, indeed.
Dan, what's going on?
Well, the budget's in full swing. These guys gave one hell of a presentation last night before the city council.
Were you there?
Absolutely.
Dan, let me ask you then. How do you get a couple of weeks ago, 16, 17 million, and all of a sudden now it's only 3 million? What kind of bookkeeping is that? Is that double entry, or is that some kind of fiction?
Well, it would seem to me that, first of all, it's unrealistic, and I can only think that the SAFER grant and some of the funding that is not going to materialize was figured in. And now they've raided some accounts, and they've found some money that they didn't know they had. I remember several years ago when, during a mayoral campaign, there was money found to give the employees a health care holiday right before an election to avert layoffs.
Gee, that's very coincidental, isn't it?
So,
is this? Are we talking about Boston beer money here, CJ?
You know, it's amazing the mathematics that the accountants, the auditor, the treasurer, and the city administration has. We were talking about this earlier today, and I think they give the CPA exam the same way they give the bar exam to these type of people in crayon.
Be nice.
In crayon. Well, you were before crayons. I mean, let's be real. But because it seems that these numbers just don't jive anywhere. And again, we hear the numbers coming from Kathy Ann Viveris, who is even less than a puppet that I thought. And that's not a good thing, because they can't get their lies straight. The mayor has one number, Kathy Ann Viveris has another, the treasurer, who's now missing because he's on vacation for a week when he's needed the most, he gives a different number, and so does the auditor. Everyone has a different number, and when we talk about issues that are coming up, nobody can answer the questions. The answer always is, I'll have to look up that information.
Bob, a shell game going on? What happened to the $800,000?
In the lawsuit?
Yeah, what happened?
They lost.
$800,000 from Dominion.
Give us a little background of that $800,000. Now, if the city had that $800,000, how many firemen would that equal?
Well, actually, they couldn't use that $800,000. That was for solar panels. That was only for a specific use. However, any similarity.
But if they saved $800,000 buying solar panels and other things like of that nature, would there be some money left in the budget that they would not?
Well,
Need to spend
that's a
on it?
difficult question, because it seems that any similarity between reality and their numbers is purely coincidental, because what's happened is that the reason they're short is that they may considered other people's money our money. In last year's budget, the SAFER grant money was considered our money, and other grant money was considered our money. And now this year, when these grants go away, all of a sudden, we have a budget predicated on X number of people that were being funded by outside sources that now have to be funded by city money. And when you look at that number, funding that number, we're $16 million in the hole.
16 million. Joe, you probably heard about this so-called shortfall. Is this going to affect the school budget if this is truly real?
Well, the net school spending has to be achieved. Now, you can go 95% of net school spending. Net school spending is somewhere around 122 million plus dollars.
Would they chop would they chop the school budget?
No,
So-
you can't go below that. You have to meet that amount of money. Now, you are allowed to go to 95% of it, but that 5% then gets carried over from FY14 to FY15. And now FY15 is just around the corner, of which case it will have a net school spending amount that will probably be somewhere around 124 or $5 million. Now, add 5% from FY14 to that, of which case now that brings it up probably another million or so, or another million and a half. So now you're up to 126.5 million, somewhere in that ballpark. But you can't keep doing this. You can't keep going year after year after year. You have to pay the piper, in that you have to get to paying, if not net school spending this year, then you pay net school spending plus the carryover next year.
Now, when
And
you say FY15, that starts in July.
that's correct, July 1st.
So people out there will know that you have a different accounting system, so to speak. The 2015 budget actually starts in July, is that it?
That's correct, July
and
1st, yes.
Most of us, of course, we go from calendar at the end of the year, December. Our new year starts in January, but
Yeah, it's not a
budgets.
calendar year, it's a fiscal year.
fiscal year. That's a fancy term.
That's why the budget has to be in the hands of the city council by June 1st and must be adopted by June 30th so that it can take effect on July 1.
Now, June 1st is coming quickly. We're at the end of April. You have May, and then June 1st, of course. Still
6
goes that
weeks.
way, right?
6 weeks.
You think the city budget is going to be, you might say, balanced by June 1st?
Yeah, balance like this. Here's one side, give me enough weight on this side to balance it. And you know, the biggest problem is this, and you know, we heard this from the city council
Why
numerous
does this
times.
always happen?
Because this city only knows one way to solve its problems. That's with crisis. It's always budgeting by crisis, legislation by crisis, carryovers by crisis. It's always by crisis. And the biggest problem we have is this. We have the city council standing here being told by the administration, by the citizens, we have to have a lean budget. We have to have a lean budget. We have to have a lean budget. Now, when we tell this to the school department, it doesn't seem to be hitting the same people, because every time we turn around, Meg Mail Brown is adding more and more administrators, deans of students, and you know, director of this and director of that, and when can we get back to teachers, students, paraprofessionals, students? I mean, it's always something else. And how can you not budget in an increase in transportation costs?
CJ, I have a difference with you with that. You know, much of these other people, although I don't agree with the superintendent with regards to the, always agree with always agree with her on the expenditure of funds. But these extra positions that you're referring does not come out of the operating budget or that net schools. That comes out of grant funds. Grant funds is somewhere in the vicinity of $36 million. if
36
a
million,
total of
that's a
all
lot.
the grants in there. And, you know, that is not part of any net school spending or any municipal contribution. The operational budget and the municipal contribution that the city has to kick in for education, the sum of those two is the net school spending.
No, I understand what the net school spending is, but my thing is this, and we get back to the city operating on grants again. What happens when those grants go away?
You're in trouble.
Yeah, but these people don't lose their jobs.
I think we'll get to a point where that may very well be if we cannot continue with the grants.
But that's what happens. The grants don't continue. And we base our budgets, we base our staffing on these grants.
Bob?
And I mean, this is how we're paying on the fire department
Bob,
right now.
Well,
not too long ago,
Yeah,
there was
go
a report that the city could be $10 million down.
Mm-hmm.
Then it came out 16 or 17 million dollars down. What seems to be the problem? They've got the treasurer, the city administrator, you have the mayor. You know, there are a number of people and you know, department heads that have their budgets and submit. Why are the figures so apart?
Because in reality, Richard, they have no idea where most of the money is in the city. They just found more money yesterday. In '91, when I sued the city about the health care, we found $1.5 million that was in the wrong account. They didn't know where that was. They found 5 accounts that had been dormant for 25 years, a few years later. In the last 3 years, we've had $3.5 million worth of errors financially in the healthcare department. This city continually has demonstrated nobody knows how much money we have and where the money is. That's why, as Danny and I have been saying for years, we need a full and independent audit of this community. When a city administrator or a city official can stand up and say we have a $16 million deficit and say that they found money they didn't know they had, there's something wrong. Because how can we know what kind of debt we're in if we don't even know how much money we have?
Now, if the so-called independent audit, and this was talked about, I believe, during the Carrera administration.
We've been talking about it.
Well, didn't the state auditor come in?
But that's not the type of audit
You
we need.
were talking about?
First of all, Bob Correa had a very cozy relationship with Auditor Danucci. It started because he wanted the school department to be looked at, and that's how DESE got here. And look, there's a lot of problems with the school department, and I don't always agree with Meg Mayo Brown, that's for sure. But Gino Danucci opened the can of worms when Bob Carrera invited him down here to look at the school department. They did very little on the city side, and since then, the DESE has tried to tell the school committee how to govern itself, which I think is absolutely ludicrous.
It is.
So the city, now, if the city were to have an independent audit, who would call for that?
The mayor,
Well,
He doesn't want
the
one.
city council, the mayor. Who-
I spoke to the Department of Revenue, and I asked them the same question. The citizens have no right to demand or ask for one.
okay, we just
Okay.
pay the taxes.
Yeah,
We just pay the taxes.
It's our money, but we don't have a right
Yeah,
to
The
know where it
mayor
is.
must request it, and the city council must agree to fund it.
Look, in
Well,
2000,
the city, I mean, you know, not to pick on anyone, but why would a mayor, any mayor, want to have his own administration audited?
they
Isn't
wouldn't.
it?
Well, this one definitely wouldn't.
Well, yeah, because it's almost an admission that they're not doing something right with the people they have there already, Joe. I mean, you got these people are making, what, 80, 90, $100,000 a year. All they do all day is work there. It's, you know, 8 hours a day, I guess, or 7 or whatever it is, all week long, and he still can't figure out how much money they have. What seems to be wrong with this?
Well, I can't speak for the municipal budget, but I can speak for the city, the school department budget, because I look at that every single month, and if I see a an account that is overexpended, I ask why. And when you're halfway through the school year, then except for items such as school transportation, that should be encumbered in there. But other expenditures that are ongoing, you should, at mid-year, you should be about half expended and have half yet to go in there. Same thing 3/4 of the way. And I look at that very closely. So I wouldn't have any objection to anybody coming in and taking an audit on the school department, because it's supposed to be audited every year anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't have any problem with that.
And theoretically, there are audits done, but not the type of policy, procedure, performance audit, forensic audit that Bob and I and others have been calling for years. And you know, and I forget whether it was 2003 or 2005, it was one of those cycles where Henry Gillette attempted to get an audit done, but the one mistake we made collectively, those of us that were involved, we didn't insist on it being a binding question.
Now, we got the law department, and lately there's been some controversy about the law department. One big episode was the $800,000. Now, the city felt they were going to be awarded half of you might say a settlement, and that amount is $800,000. But it goes to the law department. They were questioned extensively by the city council insofar as not meeting a deadline. And they came up with some excuses that the city council thought were very, very weak. There was discussion from the law department or comments by the law department that they would look into it. They would push this. If they had to, they would go before a court. In other words, they wanted the city to get the $800,000, but more beer money? What happened? I mean, how does a law department, when we're dealing with $800,000, it's not $8,000, it's not $80,000, $800,000, Bob? How do they miss a deadline? How do they not call the court occasionally and find out?
No experience.
Well, no experience and incompetence. The fact is that
Gross negligence?
Gross negligence, malfeasance. The fact is, when we were listening to the questioning at the city council, CJ pulled up the court disposition in about 30 seconds, and we're not attorneys, and maybe because we don't have crayons, we could read when we had to file that, because it said 30 days from this date, and we're not attorneys. But they also didn't get anything in writing. Every time I go to an attorney, I need to sign an affidavit to go to the bathroom. I mean, how can we have attorneys that don't require things in writing when we're dealing for almost $1 million? And not only did they not lose their jobs, they got pay raises.
Well, there was an interesting discussion that took place, and I'm going to put this out for anyone to get in on this. And that was in regards to a certain conversation that the law department had with an individual from, I think it was Dominion. And that individual said that they would keep the city in a loop, so to speak. If anything developed, they would let the person know. And the law department was asked, and I think it was by Councilor Mitchell, well, did you get anything in writing? And they said, no, we have nothing in writing. And I think Councilor Mitchell or someone asked, why isn't that person here to tell us? They said, well, the person doesn't work for Dominion anymore, and there's no way to get the person here. Well, a thing that, a question that came up was that the law department said they would file an affidavit to that effect. And I believe, again, it was Councilor Mitchell who said, well, when did the other side file an affidavit too? Was this going to be the battle of affidavits? My question to you is, you think the law department should have asked the person who verbally made the promise, we might say, that would keep the city in a loop? Would you think that the law department, prior to going to the city council, would get an affidavit from that person?
I think that they would have gotten anything in writing personally. And the problem that we have is our law department, you know, and I'm not saying this facetiously either. I think our law department's more important. They're more concerned with what type of shoes or boots they're wearing than really doing the job of law. This law department has never argued or made a case at all. They farm everything out. We get more legal fees by attorneys that don't work for the city than who do work for the city, and the only thing that they do is, if they get a legal opinion from two attorneys who are reputable and have good standing, they turn around and give an opposing opinion and say, our opinion counts.
The other fact, Richard, is the individual you're talking about hadn't worked for Dominion for months. For months, not days or weeks, for months. So, I mean, let's face it, even the most incompetent person in the world, it shows their total disregard for the money and the people's money, because if somebody was going to give me $800,000 and he told me he was going to keep me in a loop, if I didn't hear from him every day, I would be camped on his doorstep. So, you know, it was nothing more than excuses and trying to cover up their gross negligence.
Well, 800,000, gentlemen, a lot of money, and that's gone. The decision by the court basically is Fall River will not get the $800,000.
And don't forget, you've got to add on to that $70,000 for Nixon Peabody, plus probably another $30,000
Nixon Peabody
is a firm that works for the city, another outside firm that works for the city, and does all the legwork for the city, which, by the way, our corporate counsel and assistant corporate counsel said, we're going to do all the work to minimize the expenses. They did none of it. It was all done by somebody else.
Yeah, they said they would do the paperwork. And,
right. And another attorney who represented Fall River in an Illinois court, because none of our counsel is admitted to the bar in Illinois. So that's probably another $100,000. So we lost about $900,000, close to $1 million.
What's going on in the law department? Councilor, once again, Mitchell and Councilor Pereira, a few days ago was reported in the paper. I'm not sure about what they said, but maybe you can fill me in. Dan, do you have any idea what they were getting at?
Well, you know, Richard, I can recall as far back as when Ed Lambert took office and the 5 new councilors in January of 1996. Paul Hart, very early in his tenure, became the chairman of the ordinance committee at that time. Him and along with the late, in my judgment, one of the best city councilors I ever saw, the late Steve Walsh, called for an analysis of all the city's legal expenses. That was in their first term of office in January of '96. It's never been done, and we've been spending large sums of money on outside legal expenses since.
Joe, on a school committee, you have an attorney who's there at every meeting. Do you get a periodic report from the attorney insofar as his expenses? If anything has to be farmed out, does he tell the school committee?
Oh, absolutely, but he doesn't farm anything out.
Nothing goes out.
Nothing goes out.
So it's all in-house?
He handles everything himself. In there.
Would you?
We also have an attorney for special ed, to handle the special ed cases. But she does them all. She does not go out and get a sub-attorney to handle some of it.
Bob, you think the city council should strongly request that they get periodic reports from the legal department as to its expenses?
Oh, absolutely. I think
Does this happen?
This has come, when they question the law department, but the problem is that all they do is question. I mean, it's time for the city council not to just question, but to demand that the mayor have some accountability.
With the council? Why can't they say, we want to see, for the last 3 months, where you spent money.
Well, because you can't get an answer, Richard. You go before and the law department says, well, I'm not sure, you'll have to ask the treasurer, and the treasurer's either on vacation or his standard answer. I'm not sure if it's actually him answering or he's just got a tape that he can press a button, because every time he's asked the question, how much did we spend, he responds by saying, I'm not sure, I don't have it in front of me, I'm gonna have to check. And he hasn't answered a question, to my knowledge, in the 18 months he's been the treasurer.
And the other problem is that the city council, according to charter and Mass General Law, has no authority over the executive office's budget. And the legal department falls under the jurisdiction of the executive office. And even according to the Board of Bar Overseers, they say that the corporate counsel is only answerable to the mayor, not to the taxpayers, not to the city council, but only to the mayor. And he's
So-
the only one that can fire him or say anything.
So the taxpayers, they pay their taxes, pay their fees, et cetera, but they can't find out what the law department spends.
Nope, we can't. And I guess living on Jenks Street has that ability for you.
So is this, Dan, is this governance by secrecy? Where's the transparency? We're supposed, you hear that word, transparency.
Well, you know, I don't believe, there's been so much problem with trying to find out where the money is, you know, and now you've got a crisis in the fire department. What the city council needs to do when the budget hits their desk on June 1st is simply see what's funded, because we still don't know what the final budget is gonna look like. And you know, I'm sick and tired of hearing that the city council has no power. That's baloney. The city council can force any mayor not to spend a cent by rejecting their budget.
Okay.
It takes 5 votes. It doesn't usually happen, but it can happen.
The problem
we're
is,
getting-
though, when the council has turned around and unfunded something, such as the Florida Office of Economic Development, the mayor went out and took the money from other accounts and put it back into
Okay, we're
OEDs.
getting down to the end of the program. I just want to go around with the last question briefly. Dump is going to close, they say, when, in October?
Yes.
What's going to happen?
What's going to happen is we're going to have privatization of DPW. You're going to see it.
Bob?
I believe, unfortunately, that's going to be a fact, a sad fact, but something I
All
don't
those
agree
new
with.
trucks are going to go, all those new...
They're gonna put us out of business, and then once we're out of business, and the private industry has the ability to jack up the rates, you can see the rates go through the roof.
Joe?
If it goes privatization, I think that would be a very foolish mistake.
Dan?
I would oppose privatization. I think it would be the worst disaster that has hit the city in the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you out there. Thank you, gentlemen. CJ, Bob, Joe Martin, school committee man, Dan, want you to remember out there, we've got that dinner dance coming up May 17th. That's at the VFW on Shove Street. Doors are going to open at 6 o'clock. Nice chicken dinner with the works. We're going to have dancing thereafter. So if you need a ticket, let me know, or someone on a committee. And, well, all that money for the DPW, all that millions for the trucks, the bins, by the wayside?
Yep, and, yep, another waste.
75 workers laid off.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you
you,
out
Fall
there.
River.
Thank you out there for watching, and I'll see you next time.